Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you might be. My name is Kevin Michael Grace, and this is the Kevin Michael Grace Show. Let's talk about the hoax of the century. And by the hoax of the century, I mean COVID-19, coronavirus, Wuhan virus, Wu flu, whatever you want to call it. No, this virus exists, but its toll on the world has been grossly exaggerated for reasons, I suppose, that we can only guess at. Here's a smoking gun from Bloomberg. New York City added thousands of people to its coronavirus death toll to account for victims who died in recent weeks without a confirmed diagnosis. The additional deaths, totaling 3,778, pushed the city's total to more than 10,000. Almost 60% of the unconfirmed coronavirus patients died inside hospitals, the city reported. Freddie Goldstein, press secretary to Mayor Bill de Blasio, said Tuesday that the data include at-home deaths of people suspected of having COVID-19, the disease caused by the coronavirus. That judgment is based on reported symptoms, including cough, fever. Yes, and it's not as if cough, fever, and shortness of breath are associated with any other of the diseases that kill people. We are focused on ensuring that every New Yorker who died because of COVID-19 gets counted, the city commissioner, Orixis Barbo, said in a written statement. While these data reflect the tragic impact that the virus has had on our city, they will also help us determine the scale and scope of the epidemic and guide us in our decisions. The city's health department published official statistics Tuesday afternoon, reporting 6,589 confirmed COVID-19 deaths as of Monday at 4 p.m. The data released Tuesday showed among the newly counted victims, 60% died while hospitalized before test results could confirm a diagnosis. Another 22% died at home, 18% in nursing homes or hospice, and less than 1% were dead on arrival at hospitals. So we learned from Dr. Scott Jensen last week that the CDC had sent out guidance to physicians, urging them to put as many people as possible, ascribe the cause of death to COVID-19, regardless of whether they had been tested for this disease. And this is clearly what's happened. I'll describe. That, oh no, the people aren't scared. They're not panicked anymore because apparently COVID-19 is not going to be the end of the world as we know it. What should we do, sir? Inflate the death tolls. We can do that? You bet your ass we can. You know, if the numbers aren't there, just make them up. Okay, so Sweden, which was bullied into taking stricter measures, public health measures against COVID-19. Oh yeah, they're going to pay the price. And here's a tweet from someone called Alistair Hames, and he reports that Swedish deaths peaked a week ago, but are misreported on Worldometer's correct performance from government website. Yes, we see a peak about a week ago, and then a steep fall, a leveling off, and then a steep fall, and then a terribly steep fall, so that the numbers are, well, the same as they were many weeks ago. But continue to expect Sweden to be pointed to as an example of what happens if you don't crush the economy and shut down society, as well as erase civil liberties. A response from Midgelt to the Swedish news says, oh, excellent news for Sweden, and they've come down on the other side quickly, exactly as predicted by epidemiological models. They had their first case almost exactly the same time the UK did, so while they are through it, we linger on, dragging out the tail, way under ICU capacity. Ruiri O'Gorman comments, it's easier to fool someone than to convince them that they have been fooled. Here's a story from the Times of Israel. Top Israeli prof claims simple stats show virus plays itself out after 70 days. A prominent Israeli mathematician, analyst, and former general claims simple statistical analysis demonstrates that the spread of COVID-19 peaks after about 40 days and declines to almost zero after 70 days, no matter where it strikes and no matter what measures governments impose to try to thwart it. Professor Isaac Ben Israel, head of the Security Studies program in Tel Aviv University and the chairman of the National Council for Research and Development, told Israel's Channel 12 Monday night that the research he conducted with a fellow professor analyzing the growth and decline of new cases in countries around the world showed repeatedly that there's a set pattern and that the numbers speak for themselves. While he said he supports social distancing, the widespread shuttering of economies worldwide constitutes a demonstrable error in light of those statistics. In Israel's case, he noted about 140 people die normally every day. To have shuttered much of the economy because of a virus that is killing one or two a day is a radical error that is unnecessarily costing Israel 20% of its GDP. And of course, the tremendous drop in the GDP will have its own rather dire effects on public health. It will lead to more deaths. Professor Gabi Barbash, a hospital director and the former Health Ministry Director General, insisted in a bitter TV exchange that Ben Israel is mistaken and that the death tolls would have been far higher if Israel and other countries had not taken the steps they did. But Ben Israel said that the figures, notably from countries such as Singapore, Taiwan, and Sweden, which did not take such radical measures to shutter their economies, proved his point. He also posted a Hebrew paper to this effect on Facebook with graphs showing the trajectories. When Barbash cited New York as ostensible proof that Ben Israel was mistaken, Ben Israel noted that the latest indications from New York were precisely in line with his statistics that indicate daily new cases figures peaking and starting to fall after about 40 days. Asked to explain the phenomenon, Ben Israel, who also heads Israel's space agency, later said, "I have no explanation. There are all kinds of speculations. Maybe it's related to climate, or the virus has a lifespan of its own." He said the policy of lockdowns and closures was a case of mass hysteria. It certainly is mass hysteria. What else it is, and what the nature of the new normal will be, well, we're going to be talking about in a few minutes. So the pushback has begun, at least in America. A furious crowd gathers at Michigan Capitol to protest stay-home order. Lineup of cars extends for miles outside Lansing. This is from WWJ News Radio. Large and raucous crowds showed up in Michigan's Capitol Wednesday for what organizers are calling Operation Gridlock. People in their cars, on sidewalks, lawns, and on the Capitol steps gathered to protest Governor Gretchen Whitmer's Stay Home, Stay Safe executive order. Organizers of the rally want some of the restrictions eased and the state economy restarted. WWJ News Radio 950's Charlie Langdon reported it appeared thousands of people were in attendance. The lineup of cars for the protest extended for miles outside Lansing. What's it all about? As debate rages about the intersecting priorities of public health and economic vitality, the Michigan Conservative Coalition called on fed-up Michiganders to form a convoy with their vehicles, display signs, make noise, and be disruptive. Those taking part were urged to stay in their vehicle and practice safe hygiene. Cars should be filled with only members of your immediate family, no carpooling since gas is cheap, organizers told supporters in a news release. Stay in your vehicle so that the Whitmer police cannot say you are ignoring the social distancing order. However, reporting from the scene, Langdon said plenty of participants were outside their car. Many people are not observing the 6 feet between people rule, and very few have masks on. Langdon said, I asked them why that is, and they say they have freedom. They don't want to pass the virus, but they believe the governor should have more faith in them to do what they believe is right. Organizers are protesting, among other things, what they say is irregularity in the rules that allows dope shops to stay open while cigar shops are closed. They're upset that the order applies to all of Michigan instead of just hot spots like Metro Detroit, and argue that amid a pandemic, citizens can be trusted to keep themselves safe. When did one size solve everyone's local issues? An organizer of the protest said, Governor Whitmer will put you out of business before allowing mere citizens to be responsible for their own behavior. That is madness. Well, how about that? Yes, Governor Whitmer, with her strangely immobile face, yes, she likes the Procrustean bed. All must be made equal, except, I guess, dope. Dope is, can't get enough of dope. Can't restrict the sale of dope. So Alex Berenson was very interested in this, and he reports that 4 Michigan sheriffs say they will not enforce Governor Whitmer's order. Attention citizens, your Department of Pandemia reminds it is time to recite the afternoon Karen proclamation. I fear the virus. I fear the outside. I fear other citizens. I will remain inside forever and live twice as long. I sit with Karen, now and eternally. Berenson asked, how long is it going to be until these protesters start getting out of their cars? The economy is collapsing so quickly that I suspect if the lockdown is not ended real soon now, we are going to see anti-lockdown violence. We may even see the storming of public buildings by angry crowds. Oh, so what's the LoveGov up to? He's ordered all people to wear face coverings in public. This will take effect after a 3-day grace period. In outlining a gradual reopening of businesses, Cuomo also said the state is moving toward a new normal. Sounds sinister, doesn't it? Well, it certainly does to me. He said the crisis won't be over until a vaccine is made available. And I suppose until, Bill Gates says that the crisis is over. More than a third of the nation's 600,000 confirmed cases of COVID-19, CNBC reports, are in New York, according to Johns Hopkins University. While the outbreak appears to be leveling off, Cuomo said roughly 2,000 new cases are confirmed in the state every day. He said the economy won't be able to make a full comeback until there's a vaccine, which scientists said will take up to a year and a half. There will be no more society left. It will be road war, seriously, in 12 to 18 months. Cuomo continued, it's over when people know I'm 100% safe. No one is ever 100% safe. As Peter Blegvad sings, you could choke on your chewing gum. And I don't have to worry about this. When does that happen? When we have a vaccine? Until you have a vaccine, until you have the medical treatment, what do you do? How are you building the bridge? Well, it's going to be a phased reopening. Part of that phased reopening is requiring people to wear face masks. Local governments would enforce the order, but fines won't be issued at this time, he said. It would apply to people on public transit, including subways and buses, as well as in public spaces like grocery stores. It could even apply to people walking on the sidewalk. Your right to go out for a walk in the park, go out for a walk because you need to get out of the house. The dog is getting on your nerves, fine. Don't infect me. You don't have a right to infect me. Perhaps in the future, some sort of device should be constructed for the LoveGov, kind of like the old cone of silence on Get Smart, a bubble, and Cuomo would travel everywhere in this bubble so no one could ever possibly infect him with anything. Cuomo clearly is a little put out that Dr. Anthony Fauci has become America's Il Duce, so he's making his own bid. Let's have a look at the stock market. The Dow Jones was down 445 points, or 1.86%. S&P 500 down 2.2%. The Nasdaq down 1.4%. And the VIX, or the Scaredy Cat Index, was up 8.2%. CNBC reports the economic data is even worse than Wall Street feared. The economy is clearly in ruins here. So obviously we have to keep the lockdown going forever, 12 to 18 months, maybe longer, because some people might get infected. And we'll just juke the stats. We'll just add as many thousands of people as we need in order to let everyone know that it's panic situation, that the panic is justified. Oh, let's see, drinking alcohol can make the coronavirus worse, the World Health Organization says, and recommending restricting access. That is too funny. I have to think that for a great many people, drinking alcohol is the only thing keeping them sane. Execs warn Trump more coronavirus testing needed before Americans can return to work. Yeah. This is absolute madness. And as I say, referring to what's happened in Michigan today, the lockdown had better end soon, or there will be blood in the streets. Donald Trump tweeted, "Today we are having very productive calls with the leaders of every sector of the economy who are all in on getting America back to work, and soon. More to come." And I see there was a reply from someone called Teddy Kierstead, and Governor Whitmer of the strangely immobile face is raising her arm, and a wag has drawn a little Hitler mustache on her lip. Let's have a look at the chat. Okay. YT says, no effing way am I wearing a mask on my daily walks. David Wright says, 3,200 deaths from Twin Tower attacks now confirmed COVID-19 related. Yako Raipala says, good evening. About 60 people have died in my country. Median age of death, 81. Truly a crisis that needed to have the economy destroyed and the military setting up roadblocks to lock us in cities. Jonathan Pohl reports, I went out twice today without a mask. YT says, I've never heard of an 81-year-old dying. Fines are coming, Jonathan. Expect Karens accost you as well. Chogan's Kin 666 says, I go out every day without a mask. Jonathan Pohl says, none here. Neighbors are old Japanese Americans. MCT says, my neighborhood full of Karens. They are on the HOA board. Our Finnish friend says, all the women I know are in complete panic over this. The media won't stop telling us how everyone is in danger. Okay. I have winter boots made by Nokia, says YT. Will probably last me a lifetime. I had no idea. Nokia, they were at the top of mobile phones manufacturing years ago. I thought that they had gone, they had hard times. Our Finnish friend replies, Nokia is one of the giant conglomerates from the day when we used to have a protectionist economy. So there was room to make a Finnish TV, Finnish boots, Finnish etc. because foreign trade was limited. Patrick Butler reports, I live in Kentucky. The governor has shuttered the state over roughly 100 deaths, 4 million people here. Okay. AAGG says the elite are less than 1% of the world. It's time to make a stand. KMG for dictator of North America. I don't know. I could live with being dictator of Vancouver Island, and my first proclamation would be is that the lockdown is over, and then maybe I would retire and live for the rest of my life with the plaudits of a grateful populace. AAGG says, peacefully protest, don't give them what they want, nothing violent. Yes, definitely. But on the other hand, again, I don't know how long people are going to put up with having their livelihoods destroyed. Julian Piggott says, any thoughts on Japan? Next to China, economy chugging along, widespread mask use, rather socially distant by nature, liberty preserved, 150 deaths or so, not fat. No surprise the media ignores it. Matt Forney says, I'm in Albania. Government here is slowly lifting lockdown, but we still require permits to leave the house. I don't even think Enver Hoxha went that far. You know, there was a time, it's funny, when Hoxha, I think I'm pronouncing his name correctly, I could be wrong, that a group of communists in Canada, they called themselves the Communist Party of Canada, Marxist-Leninists, had decided that the Russians were ideological deviationists, that the Chinese were ideological deviationists, and only Albania was showing the true path to building socialism. It was very strange in the 1970s and 80s walking around Vancouver next to them. Okay, from the New York Post, leaked federal documents cite possible U.S. reopening from coronavirus in May. A three-stage process is described in leaked documents dated April 10th, developed by the Federal Emergency Management Agency, that's FEMA, in cooperation with the CDC. An initial preparation phase would feature a public relations messaging blitz lasting until May 1st, according to the Washington Post, which acquired the 36-page public health chapter and 11-page executive summary of the report. A second phase spanning May 1st to May 15th would see mass production of test kits and protective equipment. Then, as a third step, life would return to normal if local conditions allowed. The plan says that the reopening would take effect not before May the 1st. At least 17 million Americans have lost their jobs since state and local governments began ordering business closures last month. President Trump has been anxious to undo the unprecedented spike in unemployment, despite fears of the deadly virus. A CDC response document included in the leaked report says a priority is to reopen community settings where children are cared for, including K-12 schools, daycares, and locally attended summer camps to allow the workforce to return to work. Other community settings will follow with careful monitoring for increased transmission that exceeds the public health and healthcare systems. Well, with 90,000 hospital beds in New York State, and last time I checked, 12,000 of them occupied, there's an awful lot of runway there. But, you know, the numbers are falling. The numbers of new patients are falling. Maybe it would be possible for health authorities just to start estimating how many cases there are. You know, just pull those numbers out of thin air. Oh, what is the CDC? The CDC is not happy about this. CDC director says U.S. should brace for a second wave of coronavirus to hit next year. Ooh, scary. Dr. Robert Redfield said COVID-19 may turn out to be seasonal, like other bugs such as the flu. I think we have to assume this is like other respiratory viruses, and there will be a seasonality to it, he told Good Morning America. This is from the New York Post. Redfield said that the country needs to ramp up testing capacity now and implement other control measures, such as contact tracing, to prepare for the possibility of the next large outbreak. The CDC is science-based, data-driven. Until we see it, we don't know for certain there will be a resurgence, but it's critical that we plan that this virus is likely to follow a seasonality pattern similar to flu. He said that he refers to the strategy necessary to fight the virus as block and tackle, block and tackle. I have no idea what that might mean. Of course, the CDC is the same government organization which pretty much ordered doctors to certify every death as a COVID-19 death. It's an organization which has been utterly disgraced. So what do the boffins at Harvard have to say? Some degree of social distancing may still be needed in the U.S. until 2022 to prevent large outbreaks of coronavirus, according to a group of Harvard disease experts. Researchers from Harvard's T.H. Chan School of Public Health. Yeah, the T.H. Chan School of Public Health. They made this unsettling prediction Tuesday in the journal Science. The group looked at various computer models to simulate how the virus might spread over the next 5 years. The models considered were whether the virus was seasonal, how long immunity might last for recovered patients, and the intensity and timing of control measures. Under current critical care capacities, however, the overall duration of the SARS-CoV-2 epidemic could last into 2022, requiring social distancing measures to be in place between 25 and 75% of the time. Yeah, okay. Let's just destroy society over a panic, a needless panic, because this seems to be at the heart of it, this need to destroy society. People are not social creatures. They don't need other people. All the human contact you need can be done virtually, and anything beyond that would be irresponsible. Back to finance. Again from the New York Post. Judging by and this is by Charles Gasparino, judging by the performance of the stock market, the economic recovery from the pandemic lockdown should be swift and dramatic, a so-called V-shaped recovery, if only it were true. The stock market's recent gains don't tell the full story of the absolute mess the U.S. economy finds itself in, even as the worst of the coronavirus is behind us. Rather, the gains in equity prices are more of an indication of the uneven stimulus methods employed by the Feds. These measures will almost certainly benefit Wall Street and market speculation, even as their impact on Main Street will be slow to come. Wall Street executives and analysts predict a tale of two economies. Wall Street traders will make money, while mainstream businesses face economic conditions not seen since the Great Depression. Yeah, that's what they call a pre-revolutionary situation. There's good reason to believe that trickle-down will be pretty thin. Wall Street may recover fast as the economy founders. The Federal Reserve is pumping an estimated $10 trillion in liquidity into the financial system. That's essentially earmarked for Wall Street. These trillions flowed into just about every corner of high finance. The Fed's new programs even allowed it to buy up mortgage-backed securities pegged to strip malls that were teetering before the pandemic hit. You read that right. The Fed is now bailing out Wall Streeters who bet on strip malls. Peasants meet pitchforks. From Bloomberg. Jeff Bezos gains $24 billion while world's rich reap bailout rewards. The world's richest person is getting richer even in a pandemic, and perhaps because of it. With consumers stuck at home, they're relying on Jeff Bezos' Amazon.com Inc. more than ever. The retailer stock climbed 5.3% to a record Tuesday, lifting the founder's net worth to $138.5 billion. The pandemic has brought the global economy to a near standstill and pushed almost 17 million Americans onto the unemployment rolls in the span of 3 weeks. JP Morgan Chase and Wells Fargo signaled Tuesday that loan losses fueled by the unprecedented job cuts, many of them in the retail sector that Amazon so efficiently disrupted, could rival those incurred after the 2008 financial crisis. The worst-case fears of a 20 to 30% U.S. jobless rate are now realistic. Yet Bezos and many of his wealthy peers have seen their fortunes recover in recent weeks, helped by the boost given to markets by unprecedented stimulus efforts by governments and central bankers. While the combined net worth of the world's 500 richest people has dropped $553 billion this year, it has surged 20% from its low on March 23rd, according to the Bloomberg Billionaires Index. Yeah, what's the saying? That profits are privatized? Costs are socialized. The volume of transactions in beaten-down industries, from travel to healthcare to gaming, suggests executives and directors are more bullish than they've been at most points in the past decade, according to Sundial Capital Research. Carnival Corp board member Randall Weissenberger bought $10 million worth of stock in the beleaguered cruise line operator last week. The shares have jumped 56% since the purchase. I don't get this, because I've been reading stories about what it's really like on cruise liners, And essentially, you're stuck in a very tiny apartment, a very tiny room, and everything is overcrowded, and it's buffet food. It's like, imagine a street with apartment buildings on either side, and that's where you are, except, as I say, your flat is much, much smaller. And of course, these cruise ships have, been demonstrated to be vectors for disease for quite a long time, as is well known. Okay, from Market Watch and Sean Langlaw, why this screenshot of CNBC's Mad Money host Jim Cramer is everything that is wrong with America. And the screenshot shows Cramer, and I don't know, he looks angry, or he's got that volatile face. And it says the Dow's best week since 1938. And the chyron at the bottom says more than 16 million Americans have lost jobs in 3 weeks. Somehow the stock market has managed to push higher. In other words, at least those fortunate enough to own stocks had something to smile about. A Democratic strategist, Justin Horwitz, summed up the disconnect with this tweet that went viral. Yes, everything that is wrong with America in one image. As you can see, that's CNBC's Jim Cramer talking about the rally in the market, while the chyron points out the grim reality of the historic job losses. One commenter captured much of the response on social media by saying, the Dow is not the economy. Exactly. It is a giant government-sanctioned Ponzi scheme for the wealthy. Another pointed to the fact that, according to the Federal Reserve data, 84% of stocks owned by U.S. households are held by the wealthiest 10% of Americans, essentially Wall Street versus Main Street. So apparently Cramer said he was going to talk about it on his show. Yeah. When you remove near-term bankruptcy risk from every publicly held company, regardless of credit rating or near-term financial condition, asset prices should rise. DataTrek's Nicholas Colas wrote in a note published on Friday. Markets know that no matter how bad cash flow might be, there is a Fed loan backstop waiting in the wings if needed. So the big companies, the rich people, they get shielded. Whereas the little guy, they get crushed. I certainly hope that Trump has some plans about this, because this is unsustainable. There has to be a reform again before we end up in a pre-revolutionary situation. Oh, the new normal. There's a whole list of things we're being told. Oh, that's over. That's over. This is from Bloomberg Tax. Why going cashless has added value in pandemic age. Do we still need cash? Humans have used all sorts of things as stores of value, rare metals, strings of shells, even jugs of whiskey. Over time, the objects have become more ephemeral, from coins to paper to digital forms. Well, some people want cash eliminated. Why? Control. Every purchase, if cash is eliminated, every purchase that you make will be tracked. So big business and government will know what you spend your money on and when. It will also enable you to be tracked in real time. I mean, even if you are not carrying a mobile phone with you. Let's see, in the U.S., debit cards first beat out cash as the top way to pay in 2018, according to a Federal Reserve survey. As the coronavirus pandemic spread in early 2020, some merchants in Seattle and Sydney tried to stop accepting cash altogether, calling it unsanitary. This is the case in Victoria, British Columbia, where I live, and in the Save on Foods downtown, which I've been visiting while living in a hotel. Even the machines that you use instead of the cashier, they don't take cash. The machines that say unexpected items in bagging area, in that bossy female voice. Oh, let's see, more than 75% of adults in Kenya use the mobile wallet service, M-Pesa, for paying bills or getting paid themselves. China's central bank is already rushing to mint its own digital currency for a country where even street food sellers in small towns will prefer to scan a QR code on a mobile payment app such as WePay or Alipay than make actual change. Definitely should be taking our cues from China, which is George Orwell's 1984 in real life, only much, much worse. Yeah, this is a very long article. For governments, getting rid of cash would cut minting and distribution expenses and make it easier to crack down on tax evasion and drug trafficking. You're not in favor of tax evasion and drug trafficking, are you? No. Heaven forfend. Well, then the government should know every single thing about you, and that privacy has to be a thing of the past. Yeah, okay. Prepare for masks and gloves while dining out as restaurants adapt to life after COVID-19. This is from KPIX5 in San Francisco. Wow, romantic dinner, taking that girl out for that big date. You got your mask on, she's got her mask on, holding hands with the rubber, rubbing against rubber. Ooh, sexy. Even before the coronavirus outbreak, many Bay Area restaurants were struggling to keep their doors open. They faced rising rents, labor costs, and fees that made it tough to do business. Also, they face a law whereby that you can steal up to, $875 without being charged. That makes Dine and Dash essentially, I'm kind of surprised why everyone isn't doing it if you can't be charged for it. The ones that survived this pandemic, give it a rest. This is the planet axiom here is this is like the Black Plague, that San Franciscans woke up one morning and half the city was dead. No, not even close. You may be having dinner with a waiter wearing gloves, maybe a face mask, dinner where the menu is disposable, or half of the tables in that restaurant no longer appear, Governor Gavin Newsom said on Tuesday. So the restaurants will be limited to 50% capacity. And how many restaurants are going to survive under those conditions? Dosa owner Anjan Mitra hopes to open his modern Indian restaurants in San Francisco and Oakland. He said, I think the margins are going to change. I think the way we structure the restaurants are going to change. I think the way we socialize will change. I think we might see people in restaurants or working there, our patrons, even wearing masks more often. Decreasing the density of a restaurant will sort of change the economics. He had it. Yeah, no kidding. The economics are difficult to begin with. Now, if you release the density, which you probably have to do, it will be even less profitable. There's always the possibility, of course, that everyone will feel ashamed in a few weeks' time over this madness, this grotesque overreaction, and people wearing masks will be glowered at and perhaps even yelled at. I think that's a distinct possibility. Let's see. Saratoga's Plumed Horse co-owner Joshua Weeks plans to reopen whenever it is safe to do so. He said his restaurant has been in Saratoga for almost 70 years. It's kind of deep-rooted in that community. The Michelin-starred restaurant was one of the first in the country to provide black glove service and move tables at least 6 feet apart in early March. Other restaurants won't be coming back at all. After 75 years in Mountain View, Clark's Charcoal Broiler has decided that due to the outbreak, it will be impossible for them to continue on. Hillside Supper Club in San Francisco's Bernal Heights will also be closing its doors permanently, doubtless to be joined by many, many others. So what else? According to Recode, this is the end of The Office as we know it. The pandemic already pushed millions to work from home. Many of them will likely go back to a very different office. If and when you return to your office after the coronavirus pandemic, you'll probably notice some differences, writes Rani Mola. Upon entering your building, the doors may open automatically so you don't have to touch the handles. Before you board your elevator, you might tell the elevator where you'd like to go rather than pressing the many buttons within the elevator. When you reach your floor, you could walk into a room full of dividers and well-spaced desks instead of the crowded open floor plan that you're used to. Well, if the open floor plan is going to die, that's certainly a plus. In common areas like meeting rooms and kitchens, expect to see fewer chairs and posted documentation of the last time they were cleaned. These are just the changes you can see. Less noticeable in the post-coronavirus office would be more frequent cleaning policies, antimicrobial properties woven into fabrics and materials, amped up ventilation systems, even the addition of UV lights for more deeply disinfecting the office at night. Of course, this is all assuming you go back to your old office at all. As the coronavirus takes a steep toll on the economy and the workforce, many won't have jobs to go back to. Some who are still employed will now permanently work from home, and some employers will choose to downsize their leases or look for flexible office space rather than long-term leases. Co-working spaces will probably never be what they once were as they forego hot desks and communal spaces for more sanitary and less profitable private areas. Many of these adjustments in office design are actually just accelerations of real estate trends that existed well before the pandemic. Just as policies around telehealth, I don't know what that is, and liquor have quickly shifted. How? The COVID-19 crisis will force swift and permanent changes in both commercial real estate and work culture itself. The office as we know it will never be the same. Note the confidence there. It's almost as if, the cash, the restaurants, the office, it's almost as if this is indeed a pandemic. That the powers that be had a laundry list of things that they wanted to happen, and then, what do you know? We have the coronavirus, which it turns out has a fatality rate of 0.1%, which is just like influenza, which is exactly what Trump said at the beginning. But no, we are just going to gin up a panic so we can tick off the boxes of the new normal. Eric Holder, former U.S. Attorney General, says coronavirus could permanently change U.S. elections. Yes, and I'm thinking it's going to change it in the direction of rampant fraud becoming the new normal. Let me tell you something about Eric Holder. That when Obama was president, the Department of Justice recommended that HSBC, formerly Hong Kong Shanghai Bank of China, they're just initials now, be criminally charged for the bank's dealings with Iran, which is considered terrorism, and for laundering money for Mexican drug cartels. Eric Holder countermanded that recommendation and announced that there would be no criminal prosecution of HSBC. Well, why not? Don't we take terrorism seriously? Aren't Mexican drug cartels a serious threat to American life? Well, yeah, that might be true, but what about the bankers? Won't somebody please think about the bankers? Holder explained that were HSBC to be prosecuted criminally, this would impair confidence in the banking system, which would in turn impair confidence in the free market. So you can't have that. Just make them pay a fine. As Matt Taibbi has pointed out, many of these financial institutions are essentially criminal enterprises now. Eric Holder said voting should also last for several days. Yes, vote early, vote often, day after day after day. He recommended that people be able to cast their votes from home. We have to provide safe and healthy polling places so that the poll workers and those who want to cast a ballot in person have opportunities to do that while they're protecting themselves. You want to expand the number of voting days, get creative about this. Yeah, get creative. Calling for a sea change in thinking about how elections take place. Wisconsin voters last week were forced to head to the polls despite the deadly COVID-19 crisis in what was described by pundits, including former President Barack Obama, as a debacle. Allow people to access their primary American right by voting at home. It's not as if this is an untried concept. Oregon has been doing this for years. Yes, And soon there won't be a single Republican left in the state of Oregon. Ooh, yeah. So, according to the Wall Street Journal, coronavirus death toll in Europe likely far higher than first reported. Actually, it is far, far lower. In Italy, less than 1/5 of the deaths associated with COVID-19 or actually can be directly attributed to COVID-19. But no, see, let's just add thousands of deaths. And let's just assume, and perhaps I get a computer model working to do this, that of course they're undercounting, dreadfully undercounting. Maybe millions of people have died already. Newly published figures show deaths linked to the new coronavirus in the UK have far exceeded preliminary estimates, adding to a growing body of evidence across Europe that closely watched daily death tallies don't reveal the virus's true toll. Well, you know, you got to trust the science, you got to trust the statistics, and if you don't like the statistics, you can just come up with new ones. UK hospital beds 4 times emptier than usual. Despite the coronavirus outbreak, NHS hospital beds in the UK are 4 times emptier than normal, and a newly built hospital in the northeast of England may now never be used. Tens of thousands of NHS hospital beds remain unoccupied amid the coronavirus crisis, about 4 times the normal number, due to huge ongoing efforts to free up space and a slowdown in admissions from other causes. Figures from the National NHS Operational Dashboard show that 40.9% of NHS general acute beds were unoccupied as of the weekend, 37,500 of the total relevant 91,600 relevant beds recorded in the data. One of the reasons for the empty hospital beds is that people who would normally go to hospital for treatment are avoiding doing so because of the COVID-19 pandemic, which is going to result in more deaths, significantly more deaths. And more news from Britain. Oh, speaking of more deaths, an extra 2,600 people are dying from non-coronavirus causes as the NHS focuses all of its efforts on battling the crisis, figures show. How about that? England and Wales suffered a total of 16,387 deaths in the week up until April 3rd, the most since 2005, and more than 6,000 above average. Of the excess deaths, COVID-19 was not reported on at least 2,600 certificates, meaning they were from other causes. Experts said they were disturbed by the figures, which they say indicate Britons are struggling to access treatment due to the strain of the pandemic on the NHS. But we've already discovered that the hospitals are plenty of space. What can we learn from this? That the panic is killing people, that the panic is going to kill perhaps as many or more people than COVID-19 is actually going to kill. Tom Denning, professor of dementia research at the University of Nottingham, said people with chronic conditions might be avoiding hospitals because of the virus. I mentioned a family member of mine who told me outright that he had a operation with serious complications in December. He was 13 days in the hospital, and there are serious after effects. And he said that the treatments that he needs were being delayed or canceled, or that he had just decided, no, I'm not going to risk it. Such as the nature, his immune system has been so compromised that, you know, if he were to get coronavirus, that would probably finish him off. And where better to get coronavirus than in a hospital? Professor Denning added, reasons for the increase in deaths may include people not feeling able to attend their GP surgeries, call an ambulance, or attend A&E. Therefore, some serious conditions may present too late for effective treatment. Another possibility is that some people with serious conditions like cancer or chronic kidney disease are either unable or unwilling to attend hospital on the usual regular basis, so that their treatment regimes may lapse. Some people confined to their homes are likely to be drinking and smoking more or eating less healthily, and this may also contribute to health problems, including accidents around the home. People with diabetes or high blood pressure may struggle to manage their condition if GP surgeries are closed. Appointments have moved to over the phone or video call, but managing unstable conditions is much harder remotely than with a face-to-face attention. No, wait a minute. Come on, we can do everything virtually now. Is there any reason for people to go to doctor's offices, even to go to hospitals, with the possibility of, infecting people? Robert Dingwall, a professor of social sciences at Nottingham Trent University, said the strain of the outbreak on the NHS may be resulting in heart attacks or stroke patients not being treated quickly enough. He added, there is some fears that parents aren't taking children sick to hospital. They fear if they take their children to A&E, they may be infected with COVID-19. And there's a sidebar to this story. How will the coronavirus lockdown cause health conditions? And it refers to Professor Dingwall again, saying that a deterioration in health is expected in the next couple of years due to COVID-19. He explained high levels of unemployment are strongly associated with poor health outcomes at a population level. The impact on physical health may become apparent at a slower rate than mental health. It will be expressed in a continuing rise in obesity resulting from inactivity, limited diet, and in some cases, excess alcohol. Obesity is associated with a range of other conditions such as type 2 diabetes, cardiac, circulatory, and respiratory problems. There are also worrying indications of people delaying presentation at hospitals for conditions like stroke, where immediate medical treatment can have a big impact on the outcome. If you're having a discussion about this and some person starts wailing at you that you want people to die, that, the economy must be totally smashed and society must be dissolved and all our civil liberties must be stripped away, you might want to rub this in their faces, that this lockdown is killing people, killing thousands of people, even as we speak, even as New York City decides it has to make up numbers to bolster its death toll. I'm going to go back to the chat. Gerald Perry says, there are starving mice going into homes if all the restaurants close. Lots more people at food pantries. MCT said, are the fast food chains still open? Well, the Burger King on Douglas Street is open, but the one on Government Street is closed. The McDonald's downtown is closed. I guess the ones with drive-through are open, but the others, no. And it's weird because the Burger King on Douglas Street is normally very, very busy, and there are not very many places providing food now. And I went into it, a couple of days ago, right after I walked there, right after this show ended. So I was there, I don't know, about 6:20, and I was the only customer. I was the only customer. Metal Mike says people are grieving for the restaurant industry, but in the past, people used to eat breakfast at home, pack their lunch, and eat a dinner at home. No, this is true. This is true, but you see, consumption, and conspicuous consumption, every woman has to work, and so that makes it much more difficult to, be able to cook meals for your children. Also, you see the social status. I mean, cooking meals, unless you're a foodie, there's a great class divide in cuisine. If you're a foodie, well, sure, then you can cook. But, if you're not sufficiently trained, if you can't name the names of chefs, then you really have no business dealing with food. And all of this consumption, it boosts the GDP. William Hicks says, Kevin, I'm watching Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia on mute with closed captioning while listening to your program. I saw that film by Sam Peckinpah when it came out in, 1974? And I remember walking out of the theater in Vancouver onto Granville Street and just, what the hell did I just watch? What was that? And I guess I saw it a couple of years ago. I think I went to Turner Classic Movies. And again, that movie is totally nuts. Metal Mike says we should go back to a manufacturing heavy model. Well, I don't have any quarrel with that. Gerald Perry says the restaurant industry employs scores of people in this city. Oh, yes, again, that is true. Lecomte de Boras says obesity and mental health develop faster in tandem. Yeah. Let's see. Gerald Perry says, ironically, one young man working at Walgates has job security. Earl Pipe says Walmart has a cordon of greeter fodder strategically stationed right out front next to their barricades. Matt Forney says, wearing masks and gloves at restaurants. When I lived in Armenia, burger restaurants there gave patrons disposable gloves to wear when eating their food, and Armenians used them. It was bizarre. I mean, people say, oh, look at how attitudes towards smoking have changed. Well, there's a big difference there because, there are people who smoke and there are people who don't smoke. I mean, it's a binary division. If we're talking about, eating, going to restaurants or going to stores, everybody does that. Everybody does that. So, when smoking, it became impossible to smoke in what are called public places, even outside, well, then, you could demonize one group. And, majorities get a lot of pleasure from demonizing minorities. And this is not, these examples that I cited, they're simply not like that. Gerald Perry says, people are still throwing away their gloves onto the street here. Why didn't I get my Trump buck, says Chogokin666. I saw a list of tweets from black people in the United States, and apparently a lot of them are quite happy with Donald Trump. One of them said, Obama didn't give me, I'll say nothing, but Trump's giving me money. Trump's putting money in my pocket. I wonder, how much of a difference that is going to make. Gerald Perry, I saw a guy walking back from CVS today carrying a huge case of Bud Light, Vaseline wearing a surgical mask. Calix Rose says Harvard's endowment is multiple $billion. What was it? Charles Murray said that even with the recent stock market declines, it's over $30 billion. They can test all their students. Well, as Greg Easterbrook pointed out some years ago, Harvard has so much money that they don't have to charge tuition. They don't have to charge tuition. Let's see. Earl Pipe says, we're sorry to inform you, but your monthly social credit checkup reveals that you no longer qualify for self-control over your personal chastity device. Well, yeah, if we have universal basic income, it's going to come with conditions. Oh, I see that you're spending money. You're spending money on tobacco. You seem to be spending a fair amount of money on alcohol. We can't have that. You are going to modify your behavior, or you're not going to get your Yang bucks anymore. I have no doubt that this is in the pipeline. Britain may have hit its peak, the Daily Mail reports. Chief Medic Whitty says the coronavirus outbreak has flattened out as UK coronavirus daily death toll stays below 800 for fourth day, and number of new infections drops 12% to 4,600. Yeah, okay, that's good news. England CMO Professor Chris Whitty said, we do all think this has flattened out, but he added, we can't be sure we're past the peak. Better to be safe than sorry. The British economy has not been smashed enough. Oh, and here we go. Fears were raised yesterday that the true size of Britain's coronavirus death toll could be 50% higher than official figures because of a backlog in recording and the failure to include fatalities in care homes and hospices, and every death in care homes and hospices is going to be attributed to COVID-19. Lockdown is extended by 3 weeks in Northern Ireland as Health Secretary Hancock tells the rest of the UK the government has no intention of easing restrictions ahead of official decision tomorrow. Britain's coronavirus lockdown looks all but certain to be extended. You know, someone could be a hero. Someone could step up and be a hero. But of course, Matt Hancock was the fellow, who Peter Hitchens wrote about, who was threatening collective punishment. He was going to ban everyone going outside because of people, laying down on the grass on a warm day or sitting on park benches to read a book, that sort of things. The Labour Party has also turned up the temperature on the government, with new leader Keir Starmer saying it is obvious restrictions must continue in the coming weeks. Why is it obvious? But calling for clarity on what happens next. We have an enormous number of these deaths happening in, old age homes, care homes, hospices. These places are already quarantined. Madness. Now, the journalist Toby Young, who is a panic skeptic, has started a daily blog on this theme. It's called Lockdown Skeptics, and you can find it at lockdownskeptics.org. And there's a picture of the front page of the Daily Telegraph. Biggest economic shock in 300 years. Budget watchdog warns of slump not seen since 1709 if lockdown lasts 3 months. Unemployment rate could hit 10% with more than 3 million out of work. Grim forecast intensifies debate about when the restrictions should be eased. The Telegraph, like all the other broadsheets, leads with the OBR's grim forecast that the economy could shrink by 35% this spring if the lockdown continues for 2 more months. We also learned yesterday that 2 high street fashion chains are going into administration, Oasis and Warehouse. That follows last week's news that Debenhams, with 22,000 employees, has filed for administration, as has Calf Kitson, putting 950 jobs at risk. The collapse of these employers, not to mention the third of small businesses likely to go bankrupt if the lockdown continues, will have a cost in terms of loss of life. Yesterday, a reader alerted me to an interesting 2009 paper estimating the impact of mass redundancies on mortality by looking at job losses in Pennsylvania in the 1970s and 80s and then tracking these workers via Social Security Administration death records. The authors concluded that being made redundant at the age of 40 results in a reduction in life expectancy of 1 to 1.5 years. Another reader sent me a link to an excellent source of data for lockdown skeptics called Facts About COVID-19. If you click, you'll be taken to the latest update. Among the new studies it mentions in a preprint by John Ioannidis and colleagues at Stanford, estimating that your chances of dying from COVID-19 if you are under 65 is about the same as the risk of being killed in a road traffic accident. They point out that people under 65 who don't have any underlying predisposing conditions account for only 0.3%, 0.7%, and 1.8% of all COVID-19 deaths in Netherlands, Italy, and New York City. Another interesting paper this site links to is the serological study carried out by Hendrik Streeck from Bonn University, in which he tested a representative sample of 1,000 people in the northwestern town of Gangelt, one of the epicenters of the outbreak in Germany. He found that 2% of the population currently has the virus, and 14% were carrying antibodies, and concluded 15% of the town had been infected. By looking at the number of fatalities in the town, Streeck estimated that the infection fatality rate is 0.37%, about 10 times lower than the original World Health Organization estimate. The other big news yesterday was Donald Trump's announcement that the U.S. would stop funding the WHO because it has failed in its basic duty in response to the coronavirus crisis. The U.S. gave the WHO $400 million in 2019. The WHO has not covered itself in glory since the beginning of the outbreak, in part because it has shown itself too willing to toe the Chinese Communist Party's line. I'm thinking in particular of its infamous tweet of January 14th. Preliminary investigations conducted by the Chinese authorities have found no clear evidence of human-to-human transmission of the novel coronavirus identified in Wuhan, China. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. At the end of January, The WHO declared that travel restrictions were not necessary to contain the spread of the virus, and it's worth recalling that China imposed a travel ban on air travel from Hubei to other parts of China on January 23rd, but not from Hubei to the rest of the world. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, the Director General of the WHO, effusively praised the Chinese authorities for their response to the virus, even though that included locking up those doctors who first raised the alarm, and once they admitted they had a problem, forcibly detaining in hospitals all those who tested positive for the virus in Wuhan, whether they required hospital care or not, and imprisoning in their homes all those who tested negatives. The WHO also issued inconsistent advice about face masks, which likely led to public confusion. And then there was the interview a Hong Kong broadcaster did on the 28th of March with Bruce Aylward, Canadian, who's Assistant Director General, in which he refused to answer questions about why the WHO has locked Taiwan out of membership. Well, that's fairly obvious because the WHO is controlled by the Chinese Communist Party, and they're not going to let Taiwan take part. This crisis has inevitably led to calls for the transfer of even more power from independent sovereign states to unelected international organizations like the EU, the UN, etc., such as a piece by Yuval Noah Harari in the Financial Times. But if the behavior of the WHO is anything to go by, not to mention the failures of the EU, this experience has taught us precisely the opposite lesson. Oh, does smoking protect against coronavirus? That was the amazing claim from David Hockney, but multiple scientific studies now suggest he might be onto something. And there's a picture of David Hockney, who is, 82 years old. And there are three of his pictures behind him. It says, the eccentric artist, David Hockney, who is a smoker himself, asked in a letter to the Daily Mail, could it not be that smokers have developed an immune system to the virus? It's curious that they refer to David Hockney as eccentric. David Hockney is easily the best loved artist in Britain. And just across the board, one of the best known, best loved men in Britain. He paints pretty pictures, which people like, unlike most artists, and his work sells for a lot of money. Understandably, Hockney's claim was brushed off as laughable and rubbish by many, but is it? A leading infectious disease expert at University College London, Professor Francois Balloux, said there is bizarrely strong evidence it could be true. Data from multiple Chinese studies shows that COVID-19 hospital patients contained a smaller proportion of smokers than the general population, 6.5% compared to 26.6%. Another study by the CDC of over 7,000 people who tested positive for coronavirus found that just 1.3% of them were smokers against the 14% of all Americans that the CDC says smoke. The study also found that the smokers stood no greater chance of ending up in hospital or in ICU. The reasons for this are unclear. Some researchers suggest smoking could reverse one of the ways in which COVID-19 damages the lungs, while others argue the lung damage caused by smoke makes the organs more susceptible to failure. Governments in both the UK and US urge people to stop smoking to protect themselves from the virus, but scientists admit there is no clear proof cigarettes will worsen the disease. Well, guess what? They'll make it up. You can count on that. Here's the entire letter from David Hockney. I used to joke that being a smoker in Malibu was the equivalent of being a non-smoker in Pasadena. They used to have very bad pollution there. Could it not be that smokers have developed an immune system to this virus? With all these figures coming out, it's beginning to look like that to me. I'm serious. And remember, cigars and cigarettes are vegan. What a card. What a card. Oh, yes. Immigrants, don't you just love them? One of the things I love most about immigrants is they just never stop whining about how hard their lives are and how they come to our countries. And apparently this causes some stress, you know, with the people who are already here and with them. Well, of course, you know, immigration is an intensely alienating experience, but I guess it shouldn't be. I'm looking at a video here. Comments are turned off. It's called "You Clap for Me Now." You get that? Yeah. It's an instruction. It's a demand, and it's just remarkable. So it's finally happened, says a Chinese woman. That thing you were afraid of, something's come from overseas and taken your jobs, made it unsafe to walk the streets, kept you trapped in your home. These are various ethnic groups. A dirty disease, your proud nation gone, but not me, or me, or me, or me, various ethnics. No, you clap for me now. Oh man, you cheer as I toil, bringing food to your family, bringing food from your soil, propping up your hospitals, not some foreign invader, delivery driver, teacher, lifesaver. Don't say go home. Don't say not here. You know how it feels for home to be a prison. You know how it feels to live in fear. So you clap for me now. All this love you are bringing. But don't forget when it's no longer quiet. Don't forget when you can no longer hear the birds singing. What? Or see clearer waters. What? That I crossed for you. Again, what? To make lives filled with peace and bring peace to your life too. Come, all you Gretas, you Masalas, you immigrants. See what we have learned. It only takes the smallest thing to change the world. And there's a montage of faces, and these people, they are really, really pushing their luck. Well, let's talk about all the immigrant success stories. Okay, why don't we talk about Rotherham then, in Oxford and Newcastle and all the other cities? Why don't we talk about that? Why don't we talk about knife crime in London and other cities? No, don't recognize any patterns there. Well, why not? On the one hand, apparently all these immigrants are a tremendous boon to Britain. Shouldn't we balance that against the evidence that they are perhaps not such a boon? The idea that the immigrants in Britain are somehow terrorized is absolutely absurd. It is, of course, closer to the truth to say that the opposite condition obtains. Again, from Summit News, German lawyer who criticized lockdown arrested, taken to psych ward. A German medical lawyer who criticized the coronavirus lockdown law was arrested and taken to a psychiatric ward where she says she was violently abused by authorities. Beata Barner published a press release on April the 3rd decrying the German lockdown laws as flagrantly unconstitutional, infringing to an unprecedented extent many of the fundamental rights of citizens. These measures are not justified by the Infection Prevention Act, hurriedly amended just a few days ago. Long-term restrictions on leaving home and meeting others based on high death rate model scenarios, which fail to take account of actual critical expert opinions, and the complete shutdown of businesses to shops with no proof that they pose any risk of infection are thoroughly unlawful. Bonner called for a nationwide protest on Easter Sunday to end the tyranny at once, before Heidelberg police announced that they would seek to prosecute her for inciting Germans to break the law. Well, there's the German spirit. On April 13th, Bonner called her sister from Heidelberg's Clinic for Allgemeine Psychiatry, describing what happened to her. After claiming she was suspiciously followed by a car, Bonner says she asked another motorist to call the police, only for the police to show up, handcuff her, and push her to the ground with massive force. After being driven to the psychiatric facility, Bonner says she was treated like a terrorist. The lawyer was charged for incitement yesterday, with her attorney sounding the alarm bell over her treatment. I shouldn't have to add, Bonner's claims of very grave abuse have untoward connotations of the darkest chapters of German history, he said. This sounds fantastic, but I remember reading some years ago in the London Spectator, one of the writers was living in Germany for some time, and he found himself on a train without the proper ticket. And so a transit policeman, he was given an order to appear in court to deal with this, and he was officially offered psychological counseling, because what sort of person would go onto a train without a proper ticket? Must be, must have a screw loose. More news from Germany. Angela Merkel says small shops can reopen and considers easing restrictions on schools, despite Germany seeing the deadliest day of coronavirus with 285 fatalities. Yesterday, Germany will allow smaller shops to reopen next week and schools in early May. Experts warn there is a time lag between slowing infections and lower death rate. Here we go again. Merkel has warned that masks should be worn on public transport and in shops. Should be worn or must be worn, but I think that in Germany, should pretty much means must. Merkel said that a ban on gatherings of more than 2 people in public, 2 people, and an obligation to keep at a 1.5 meter distance from others, which has been placed since March 23rd, will remain in place. The measures were set to expire on Sunday. They're really missing this. The bureaucrats, the politicians, the total control over people's lives. Well, turns out people aren't dying as they were expected to die. And of course, we know that many of these deaths are simply made up. But no, our power is slipping away. We can't have that. Italians question merits of virus testing. This is from Agence France Presse. Testing is being held up as the world's best bet for ending the economic crippling and emotionally draining coronavirus lockdown. But some doctors at the Italian epicenter of the health crisis doubt that countries can test their way out of confinement. It is a nonsense, said Milan's Polytechnic Institute professor David Manca. Conceptually, I am skeptical. The reason for Manca's skepticism is plain to see in the math. Milan's Lombardy region has 10 million people and 11,142 officially registered COVID-19 deaths. The economically vibrant area, the size of Belgium, has been under one of the world's strictest lockdowns since early March. Few regions need testing more, yet Lombardy has been conducting just 6,500 tests daily over the past 10 days. Manca estimates it would take more than 5 years for everyone in Lombardy to get tested just once. Well, perhaps you want to do across, just pick a few thousand people at random and test them. That will tell you the infection rate. But they don't want to do that. And I think it's fairly obvious why they don't want to do that, because then we'll find that the death rate from COVID-19 is quite low and really little different from good old influenza. Trump's move to cut WHO funding prompts world condemnation. Oh dear. We regret the decision of the President of the United States to order a halt in the funding to the WHO, says the communist Ethiopian Dr. Tedros. He went on to say that the organization will assess what impact the withdrawal will have on their work and then try to fill any gaps with partners. Trump has repeatedly labeled COVID-19 the Chinese virus, which it is, and criticized the UN Health Agency for being too lenient on China. Outside experts have questioned China's reported infections and deaths from the virus, calling them way too low and unreliable. An investigation by the Associated Press has found that 6 days of delays between when Chinese officials knew about the virus and when they warned the public allowed the pandemic to bloom into a public health disaster. The European Union said Trump has no reason to freeze WHO funding. Yeah, just pimping for the Chinese communists. Apparently that's not a good enough reason. Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison said he sympathized with Trump's criticisms of the WHO, especially its unfathomable support of reopening China's wet markets where both live and freshly slaughtered animals are sold. That said, the WHO as an organization does a lot of important work, blah, blah, blah. Well, whatever happened to the Australian people? We're not going to throw out the baby with bathwater. New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern, the sad head-covered lady, you might remember, said the WHO was essential to tackling the pandemic. Germany's Foreign Minister Heiko Maas wrote on Twitter that placing blame doesn't help. The virus knows no borders. Yeah, and who engineered that situation? The Netherlands is supporting the WHO. Yeah, and we'll get back to the Canadian reaction a little later. Bill Gates, who has a very close relationship with the World Health Organization and with Dr. Anthony Fauci. Bill Gates is a very close friend of Jeffrey Epstein, even after his conviction for sex offenses and been on the Lolita Express to Pedo Island many, many times. Bill Gates, who of course is the person who will decide apparently whether we will live or die, because got to have a vaccine before the lockdown ends, and I just assuming this vaccine is going to have to be approved by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. He said he slammed Trump's decision to withhold $500 million in funding to the WHO, saying it's as dangerous as it sounds. The tech magnate, who is worth $104 billion, tweeted Wednesday saying the U.S. involvement with the WHO is now more necessary than ever. Yeah, they screwed up. It seems they screwed up maliciously, but, you know, instead of being punished, they should be rewarded. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce, no surprise there, and the American Medical Association lead the outrage against Trump's controversial move, saying it wasn't in the best interest of the country and urged him to reconsider. Okay, so Bill Gates has an Instagram account, and he posted a little video. Thank you, thank you, healthcare workers. Yeah, thank you, healthcare workers. And you familiar with this expression, being ratioed? His message says, thank you to all of the healthcare workers who are making heroic efforts to test and treat patients across the United States and the world. First comment from Ricky Diggs. Looks like your plan for mass depopulation and microchipping is crashing right in front of your face. People from around the world have spoken, and we will not comply with your BS. We will rally together like no one has seen before. By the way, how many times did you fly in Epstein's plane to Pedo Island? And he's just absolutely being savaged in the comments. But then again, he has his $104 billion and his lovely wife, Melinda, to keep him warm. Again, from Summit News, this time from Steve Watson. The Pentagon is investigating the possibility that the deadly coronavirus, which is now killing thousands of Americans every day, came from the Biological Research Laboratory in Wuhan. General Mark Milley, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, has confirmed that the DoD is looking into the theory that the virus was leaked out of the Wuhan Institute of Virology. He made the comments at a press briefing broadcast by PBS Tuesday. There's a lot of rumor and speculation in a wide variety of media, blog sites, etc. It should be no surprise to you that we've taken a keen interest in that, and we have a lot of intelligence take a hard look at that. At this point, it is inconclusive, although the weight of evidence seems to indicate natural, but we do not know for sure. In a separate interview Tuesday, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo was also asked about the notion of the virus leaking from the lab and did not rule out the possibility. Pompeo was asked by Tony Katz of the Morning News, does the State Department believe that China absolutely purposefully engaged a virus, or is there a belief that there was a leak from a virology lab in Wuhan and China did not let the world know about it until it was too late? The develops dovetail with a report in the Washington Post Tuesday, which I talked about, detailing how U.S. embassy officials in China visited the Wuhan Institute of Virology in 2018 and subsequently issued official warnings to the State Department about the inadequate safety at the lab where researchers were meddling with bat coronaviruses, because that's what you want to do. Apparently, previous bat coronaviruses have not been deadly enough, and we need to make them deadlier. Okay. China concealed a coronavirus from the West and is evading blame for the pandemic, a former head of MI6 said today. Sir John Sowers said Beijing was not honest when the disease first surfaced and faced anger from the international community. He also insisted the World Health Organization faced serious questions for failing to scrutinize China's activities, although he suggested Donald Trump should direct his fury at the country rather than the UN agency. The comments came after ex-Foreign Secretary and former leader of the Conservative Party, Lord Hague, warned the UK cannot be dependent on the Asian superpower for technology after the crisis demonstrated it does not play by our rules. MPs have been demanding a major overhaul of British relations with Beijing, saying its companies should not be allowed to take part in the new 5G telecoms network. And of course, they've been burning down 5G towers in Britain. It seems that the world is turning against China, and not before time. Here's a piece from The Diplomat. Did Xi Jinping deliberately sicken the world? PRC moral turpitude forces us to consider the unthinkable. This is by Ben Lawson. We often ascribe a basic level of humanity to even the cruelest leaders, but People's Republic of China leader Xi Jinping's actions have forced us to rethink this assumption. Although the emergence of the coronavirus, now known as SARS-CoV-2, was probably not due to China's actions, the emphasis that its authoritarian system places on hiding bad news likely gave the disease a sizable head start, infecting the world. But most ominously, China's obsession with image and Machtpolitik raises serious questions about its lack of moral limits. At some point, the Chinese Communist Party learned of the epidemic and made a decision to hide its existence, hoping it went away. Exposés in Hong Kong's South China Morning Post and the Chinese mainland's Caixin show that the information that did flow out of China early in the crisis did so only because of the courage of individual Chinese people in the face of government repression. Yes. Hearing the World Health Organization repeat and praise the party line while giving short shrift to health advice until quite recently has alarmed many. Seeing Beijing sell defective wares and claim it as humanitarian aid has angered many more. Spreading disinformation during the crisis and hinting at using life-saving tools for leverage while denying even the faintest hint of wrongdoing, I suspect have ruined China's reputation for some time to come. In short, China's good offices have been reserved almost entirely for burnishing its image at the world's expense while calling it the greatest kindness and good deeds. Rush Limbaugh got into controversy about this. A caller said, I've been bothered very much by this worldwide response to this coronavirus, and I have a hypothesis. As everyone knows, there is a level 4 biolab near the wet market in Wuhan, where this supposedly started, and I suspect that the intelligence agencies around the world were told that this was a released bioweapon. Rush says, whoa, 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 several times. You think there are elements in our government who've been told that this was a purposeful released bioweapon? The caller says, I'm not saying it's purposefully released. It could have been accidentally released. I don't know if they know. Very much like when Saddam said he had them, they believed Saddam had chemical weapons, but they were unusable. Perhaps there is intelligence that there are some bioweapons. There are bioweapons being made in Wuhan, and that to me explains the worldwide overreaction to something that is kind of a mild flu. The Associated Press. China didn't warn public of likely pandemic for 6 key days. Everyone is beating up on China now. From the Daily Mirror, coronavirus. Chinese whistleblowers remain missing and in the hands of the government. Citizen journalists Chen Kuishi and Fang Bin disappeared in February after uploading videos showing the devastation the killer bug was having in Wuhan. While Dr. Ai Fen was unreachable from March 29th, she was apparently confirmed to be working again at Wuhan Hospital this weekend. This comes as China imposed restrictions on the publication of academic research on the origins of COVID-19. President of Reporters Without Borders, Pierre Haskey, told Le Parisien, there is very little information about what happened to the missing pair, but said the only certainty is that they are in the hands of the Chinese authorities. I mentioned Erwin Kotler yesterday. Again, not many of you will have heard of him, but trust me, he is exceedingly influential around the world. A piece from the Globe and Mail. Former Liberal Justice Minister urges sanctions against Chinese officials who covered up early COVID-19 outbreak. He says the world would have been far more prepared to handle the outbreak if Chinese Communist Party officials had acted sooner, alleging government authorities covered up and hid early news of the outbreak. Kotler is urging Canada to impose Magnitsky-style sanctions on Chinese officials who mistreated or silenced whistleblowers, including medical staff and citizens. The Sergei Magnitsky law allows Canada to impose asset freezes and travel bans on human rights abusers around the world. The former minister said he expects there will be lawsuits to try and seek reparations from China, but he said governments such as Canada's need to do their part to hold Beijing accountable. Well, the Canada's Minister of Health, who is not Patricia, not Pat, but Patty Hajdu, said that any suggestion that China had done anything untoward was a conspiracy theory. Oh, we're talking about Bill Gates, who's worth $104 billion, and the basis of his fortune is, of course, his co-founding with Paul Allen, the company Microsoft. Bill Gates just recently left the company. He's no longer on the board. And Microsoft has decided, I don't know, to celebrate the coronavirus? They have decided to go into partnership with Marina Abramovic. She is the Serbian Satanist who practices what's called spirit cooking. And Microsoft put up a video, just under 2 minutes, extolling this woman's genius, and how thrilled Microsoft is to work with her. And the reaction was so negative that very quickly Microsoft relabeled the video as private. One is reminded that Madonna, who seems to have gone bonkers, she announced that she was making a gift to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation while wearing a shirt that depicted Satan on a cross. Okay, Richard Dawkins. You all know Richard Dawkins, Selfish Gene fellow. The fellow who said that Darwinism made it possible for him to be an intellectually fulfilled atheist. He seems to be having a hard time. Heathen rage. This is what he tweeted yesterday. Vain Caligula, besotted with power, thought he was a god. There's always a danger that democracy can yield a Caligula. U.S. founding fathers built in safeguards, but they never foresaw a Congress so cowardly as to allow an elected Caligula to anoint himself. Richard Dawkins went to Balliol College, Oxford, which is very highly regarded, where he studied zoology. I asked him whether he had taken any history classes. Perhaps he'd simply forgotten that, of course, that Rome was not a democracy and that Caligula was anointed and not elected Caesar. Oh, yeah, I want to talk about 2 + 2 = 5. That, look, we know that China has done horrible things, and we know that the WHO is in bed with China. And we know, if we've been paying attention, that this crisis has been grossly exaggerated for political reasons, and we don't really know what those political reasons are yet. But no, we are being told, don't trust the evidence of your eyes and ears. We're going to give you the official version. This is a story from DNYUZ. The defiant beauty of cherry blossom season. It's pathetic fallacy. How is this defiant? The season of pink has arrived. Although the coronavirus outbreak has made it difficult to enjoy the cherry trees, it's still possible to admire the blossoms from a safe distance, either by scrolling through online cherry trackers, strolling through a park that is still open, finding the perfect view through a closed gate, or even driving through New Jersey. At Brooklyn Botanic Garden, Sakura Matsuri, or Cherry Blossom Festival, has been an annual tradition since 1982. But this year, the garden's 214 cherry trees will bloom without an audience. The festival, which can draw some 70,000 people over one weekend, has been canceled. The garden closed. Well, Victoria, where I live, is famous for its cherry blossoms. They bloom here much earlier than they do in New York City, a month earlier. There's a bunch of them in the parking lot of my hotel. They're all over the city, and thankfully, the lockdown here is not as severe in terms of personal movement as it is elsewhere, although, as I say, the economy of Victoria and Vancouver Island has been smashed. Let's see, from Vaughn Palmer in the Vancouver Sun. Singapore setback concerns Dr. Henry on when to ease BC restrictions. Dr. Bonnie Henry is British Columbia's Chief Medical Health Officer. The reason why I picked this story, a man walks past a painted COVID-19 mural of Dr. Bonnie Henry on Tuesday along Powell Street in Vancouver. This was some sort of spontaneous eruption. Bonnie Henry is the woman who stands in front of a lectern every day and says, we have X number of cases, X numbers of deaths, and lockdown has to continue, lockdown, lockdown, lockdown. She's a beloved figure, apparently. Health bureaucrats are now beloved figures. Well, that's the manufactured consent that's at play here. Laramie Hirsch had something very interesting to say about this. As I see all of these women wearing face masks, and it becomes clear to me that they love it, I begin to realize this pandemic has taught us one thing. Women love to be controlled. In fact, it seems to me that it is American women in particular who fancy this new trend. And I'm starting to think that they just love this because their men have allowed them to go out of control. They haven't been reined in and they've gone wild. But in reality, they were wanting some sort of controls this entire time. Men stepped back and let them go haywire like furies escaping Pandora's box. This is why they like the nanny state. This is why they love the authoritarian net. Because men haven't been strong. Blame cuckish sensibilities, blame gamma sensibilities, blame women's suffrage, whatever it is. Men have allowed their women to go crazy in this society, but they've always wanted to be subdued. Looks like the state will do it. I think that this is quite true. Absolutely true. Most of these medical officers that we hear from are women. In fact, the CBC was celebrating the female control over the medical bureaucracy, and there's a tendency amongst women to think that any risk is too much risk. Well, you know, if that were the case, I suppose we never would have ventured out of the caves. Isn't that the story? We never would have left Africa, if you believe in all that sort of thing. Anyway, wise words, I think, from Laramie Hirsch. Oh, yes, manufactured consent. This revolting article from PR Spiv, Bruce Anderson. We tried social distancing and it brought us closer together. Oh, it's paradox. It's pernicious nonsense is what it is. It took social distancing to remind us how little divides us. Yes, we are literally scared to death of every other person on earth, but this is uniting us. Our fear, our panic unites us. This is Orwellian. Here in Canada, and it seems in some other parts of the world, the most worrying health and economic event in decades is helping us rediscover how much we depend on and need each other. Oh, for God's sake. Let's see, is there any Trump bashing? I suspect, well, yeah. When push comes to shove, Canadians know what's right and want the right thing done. Canadians are not asked about the most important decisions in their country. This is made by the elite. The idea that Canadians would be allowed to choose what the response to COVID-19 is, it's absolutely ridiculous. What else do we have in manufactured consent? Oh, again, from the National Observer, Trump's deadly cuts to WHO make COVID-19 crisis worse. This is from Andrew Lodge. By any reasonable assessment, the U.S. handling of the pandemic has been nothing short of disastrous thus far. Really? Then why are the lines on the graph so much lower in the United States than they are in a whole host of other developed Western countries? And, oh, let's see. That Trump seeks to juxtapose his decision with public health officials in the WHO is so transparently and patently false as to defy comment. Oh, Orange Man bad, WHO good. Listen to what the Communist Party of China has to say. They know everything. They're wise. They only want the best from us. Of course, I'm sure that this fellow is a truly independent journalist, and there should be no suspicion of him whatsoever. You know, I won't allow it. But reading these types of stories and this manufactured consent line about the WHO in the People's Republic of China, I'm thinking, how many people are on the take Obviously not that last reporter. Obviously not him. How many people in my country and in the United States, how many are on the take from China? Someone named K.W. Grafton writes in National Newswatch, which is closely, Bruce Anderson runs the National Newswatch, which is closely associated with the Liberal Party of Canada. In fact, his daughter, Katie Purchase, was a senior Trudeau spokes thingy. Let's see. Daily stories abound of fake news reporting on COVID-19. Now, you see, this guy hasn't been keeping up. See, fake news was co-opted by the right, by the Trump supporters. You're supposed to call it misinformation or disinformation now. Governments around the world are cracking down on fake news hawkers. Oh, really? Health services and government agencies are working with social media in an effort to promote reliable information. Canada's Cyber Intelligence Agency, the Communications Security Establishment, confirmed it's acting to dismantle COVID-19 information websites designed to look like Canadian government sites. Yes, circus pioneering giant and renowned hoaxer P.T. Barnum is famously quoted as saying, "There's a sucker born every minute," a reference to the unfathomable gullibility of human beings and the fact that fake news hawkers and the permanent political class gleefully embrace today. How about that? How about that? We have totally unjustified panic, but no, we're the suckers, not the elite. Not the elite. And then he goes, why are people so gullible? You see, if you disagree with the elite, you are a gullible person. In the current climate of pandemic panic paralyzing the world, leadership and accurate information are even more important. Critical thinking is well critical. I learned a long time ago to dismiss anyone who uses the term critical thinking. Oh, yeah, I'm a critical thinker. I'm smart. I'm not gullible. I'm not a sheep. I hold all the elite views, every single one of them. And when the elite view changes, my view changes to match it, because I'm a critical thinker. Federal government open to new law to fight pandemic misinformation. See, this is Elizabeth Thompson at CBC News. She, or the headline writer there, she gets it. Not fake news. Misinformation, although fake news is in the subhead. The federal government is considering introducing legislation to make it an offense to knowingly spread misinformation that could harm people, says Privy Council President Dominic LeBlanc. He told CBC News he is interested in British MP Damian Collins' calls for laws to punish those responsible for spreading dangerous misinformation online about the COVID-19 pandemic. If the government decides to follow through, it could take a while to draft legislation. Extraordinary times require extraordinary measures, and it is about protecting the public. Yes, these are extraordinary times. It's a state of emergency, as Carl Schmitt might say. We can't have free speech. No, you can't have free speech. The comments from LeBlanc and MP Charlie Angus come as governments around the world struggle to curb dangerous misinformation and disinformation circulating about the COVID-19 pandemic. The misinformation has shifted to conspiracy theories about what triggered the pandemic. Claims that it was cooked up in a lab. Oh, golly, I wonder why that might be. A few hundred feet from the notorious wet market in Wuhan, there is a top-tier biolab where they have been designing new bat coronaviruses, which so frightened the United States that diplomatic personnel made an inspection and sent a report to the State Department talking about lax security and safety standards. But to talk about that would be a conspiracy theory. The British government has set up a rapid response team to correct false information circulating online. Collins has launched a fact-checking site called Infotagion. Let's see. This legislation would be perhaps modeled on Germany's laws governing online hate speech. Yeah, you want to go with Germany. They got a tradition, you know. I think it's such a serious public emergency for someone to knowingly, willingly, and at scale and maliciously spread this content should be an offense. So, okay, to talk about the origins is apparently a conspiracy theory and is going to be banned in my country. I'm not, they just keep saying misinformation, misinformation. Well, what are the other examples of the misinformation? You don't do this. They don't put this in their stories anymore. That so and so is being tried for hate speech or for supposedly harassing a lawmaker. Okay, what was the nature of the hate speech? You don't have to even quote it directly. You can paraphrase it. But increasingly, reporters leave this out of the story, I think because they know that if people saw what actually led to these, hate crime and harassment prosecutions, they would not be best pleased. Oh, UN chief warns the world. Misinformation. Oh, God, there's so much misinformation, a dangerous epidemic of misinformation. You see, they medicalize this. How can misinformation be an epidemic? The UN chief decried what he describes as a global misinfodemic that is spreading harmful health advice, snake oil solutions, falsehoods, and wild conspiracy theories. Hatred is going viral, stigmatizing and vilifying people and groups. I think one group of people in particular. Mutual respect and upholding human rights must be our compass in navigating this crisis. The UN chief said people around the world are scared and want to know what to do and where to turn from advice, and go to the UN because the UN has never steered us wrong. I think that I really hope that Trump would pull the United States out of the UN and force the UN to leave, the headquarters to leave New York City. How about Mogadishu? I think that Mogadishu would be the perfect new headquarters for the United Nations. Andrew Coyne has weighed in. Andrew Coyne he's a neoliberal. Trade, 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 open, open, open. Canada needs more people, more people, more people, more people. And he's also a social revolutionary, which makes him Canada's leading conservative pundit. The neoliberals, they are running scared. He writes in the Globe and Mail, a month in, with the entire population under house arrest, the economy in ruins, the healthcare system under siege, and the number of dead still mounting, the feeling is universal. We must never let this happen again. How to prevent it, though? There are consensus breakdowns. Two schools of thought have emerged. For the first, the problem is our exposure as an open economy to events outside our borders, from global pandemics to the resulting disruptions in international supply chains and shortages and bottlenecks at home. We overextended ourselves, in other words, and we are now paying the price. To which the answer is to shock-proof the economy against such dislocations: less openness to trade, more reliance on local production, less market, more state. No, how about just more redundancy, that less scale? This just-in-time system has backfired on us in a very big way. Oh, the second explanation is the problem is not our exposure to these events, but rather our lack of preparedness from them. Better early warning systems. Well, that's difficult, when China decides it's going to keep this secret. It's difficult when China is going to allow 500,000 people to leave Wuhan, when it's going to institute travel bans inside the country, but allow Chinese people, including from Wuhan, to fly all over the world. That begins to look a little malicious. Does it not? Oh, he talks about our system's notorious inefficiency. Well, we need more inefficiency and less efficiency, because this efficiency has led to the 1% hoovering up all the aggregate gains due to neoliberalism. The time of the neoliberals is up, right up. If the case for efficiency remains undimmed, give your head a shake. So does the case for globalization. Not only our prosperity, now our very safety depends upon maximizing national productivity. Shock-proofing the economy isn't going to do it. Open trade, buying in the cheapest market, selling in the dearest is. I want to see an algorithm that can write Andrew Coyne columns. It should be fairly easy to make. You just feed in the latest data, and yeah, efficiency, good. Oh yeah, we won't make anything in Canada anymore. We'll just have everyone will just be selling coffee. Yeah, that sounds like a real strong economy, doesn't it? Okay, so the current situation in Canada, the latest figures, let's see. 28,364 confirmed cases, 1,010 deaths. Again, the population of Canada is 38 million people. British Columbia has 1,561 cases, and British Columbia has a population of 5.1 million. Health officials announced 3 more deaths, 44 more cases of COVID-19 in BC. 44 cases. Yeah, one can see how that justifies completely smashing our economy. A total of 75 people have died from COVID-19 in BC, 75 in a population of 5.1 million, with the majority of them being patients at long-term care homes in the Lower Mainland, where we have discovered, and apparently this is true across Canada, the level of care is dismal. And again, I expect there to be criminal investigations and many lawsuits. Okay, so how many cases on the island? Are they still reporting that, or are the numbers so low that they're too embarrassed to do so? Let me just search. Oh, we're up to 92 cases on the island, 92 with 2 deaths. Again, totally justifying shutting down the economy and atomizing society. Again, I have to say, I am somewhat grateful that the officials in my province have not gone as completely nuts as they have other places. The Premier of BC, John Horgan, has extended the public state of emergency until April 28th. They're going to play that game 2 weeks more, 2 weeks more, 2 weeks more, and then people will just sort of forget how long this has been going on. I suspect that there are people now who are, what did it used to be like? You remember when you could walk into a restaurant and sit down and it would be filled with people, and there'd be, you know, people here, people there, and everyone just sat there and ate their meals, and no one was wearing gloves, and no one was wearing masks, and no one was afraid? Come on. Did that really happen? I don't know. Sounds rather fanciful. Okay, Trudeau has said, oh, here we go again, the Toronto Star, which is very closely tied to the Liberal Party of Canada. COVID-19 numbers are likely to be far higher than Ottawa predicts, researchers say. And I suppose if they can't get the numbers, they'll just make them up. Prime Minister Princess Rockstar says it's not happening yet with regard to reopening the economy. He explained that the government has to be extremely careful with any steps it takes towards letting Canadians go back into their offices and allowing non-essential businesses to reopen. It seems like over the past days, people have been talking about, oh, we'll reopen this, we'll do this, we'll reopen that. It's not happening yet. If we reopen too soon, everything we've been doing now might be for nothing. He sounds like a woman. Canadians need to hold on still, and then when we're ready, when we feel like we're through, once the experts are telling us that we can talk about reopening the economy a little bit, we will take very careful steps in doing that. Baby steps, I suppose. Again, presumably there's some adults in his office who could tell him that, you know, if this goes on until there's a vaccine, which is what he has suggested, there's not going to be a Canada. There's not, you know, if this goes on for 2-3 months, we are looking at road wars. Oh, yes. So we have a parliamentary system here in Canada, and one of the institutions of parliamentary democracy is question period. Now, members of other parties, opposite parties, or sometimes the government party, they ask a government minister up to and including the Prime Minister a question. And the minister is supposed to answer if he or she knows the answer, and if he or she does not have the information, to promise to return with that information within a certain period of time. But it's become an absolute farce. It's not mandatory, it's simply a tradition. And governments decided they could simply ignore the tradition, and question period is absolutely useless now. But it's just particularly shocking. A video posted by the Conservative MP Pierre Poilievre yesterday. He asked the Deputy Prime Minister of Canada, Chrystia Freeland, the Ukrainian candidate, that there was military intelligence going back to early January suggesting that the COVID-19 virus from China was a serious threat and that this was being kept secret. Did the Prime Minister of Canada, or any cabinet ministers get this military intelligence? And Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland says blah, 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 Five Eyes, NATO, NORAD, close communication. She won't answer the question. So he does it again, yes or no, and repeats the question, blah, 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 blah. I think he does it like 6 times. And I don't know, perhaps it would be better just to get rid of question period than to allow it to become such a farce. Andrew Scheer, the Conservative Party leader, says he has serious concerns about the Who. You know, if Andrew Scheer had showed the level of, discernment and strength that he has shown in recent weeks, if he had acted like this during the election, he would be Prime Minister now. Oh, Canada is disappointed in the U.S. move to freeze funding for the World Health Organization. Karina Gould, Canada's International Development Minister, said the move was disheartening. Of course, we're disappointed because now more than ever, is this the line that was sent out? Now more than ever? A coordinated global response based on science and accurate data is essential, the minister said in an interview. We are living in an unprecedented and historic situation, and the global community must work with multilateral organizations, including the WHO, in order to combat this pandemic. What do we know about Karina Gould? Well, she's a curious person. She's 32 years old. 32 years old. She grew up in Burlington, Ontario. At 16, I'm reading from Wikipedia, she participated at 16 in the Forum for Young Canadians. After graduating from high school, she spent the next year volunteering at an orphanage in Mexico, where she met her husband, Alberto Girones. She returned to Canada, attended McGill, and got a joint honors degree in political science and Latin American and Caribbean studies. She graduated first class honors with distinction, and she helped organizing for fundraising for humanitarian aid for Haiti. In 2010, she took a job with the Organization of American States in Washington, D.C., working as a consultant in the Migration and Development Program. She is cited as contributing to the 2011 report, International Migration in the Americas. She subsequently completed a master's degree in international relations at Oxford University. Upon completion of her graduate studies at Oxford, she decided to move back to her hometown of Burlington. She took a job working as a trade and investment specialist for the Mexican Trade Commission, pro-Mexico, in Toronto. Wow, talk about your dual loyalties. There are many such people in the Canadian cabinet. Chrystia Freeland has exceedingly close ties to the Ukraine. Her grandfather was a Nazi collaborator who was so important to the Nazis that they kept taking him with them. As they retreated, he ended up being a U.S. Army intelligence asset when the war ended, and then he ended up in Alberta. Chrystia Freeland's mother co-wrote the Ukrainian Constitution. Does that seem normal to you? Chrystia Freeland and her sister own an apartment in Kiev. Curious, don't you think? Okay, of the coronavirus. Let's talk about lesbians. It's a story from the BBC. I met my boyfriend, actually it turns out to be from January the 3rd, 2019, but I only became aware of it yesterday. I met my boyfriend 12 years after giving birth to his child. When Jessica Scher bought sperm from a sperm bank in order to start a family, she never imagined that more than a decade later she would meet the donor and would feel a strong attraction to him. In 2005, when my eldest daughter was born, I became the first lesbian parent I had ever met. This was the American Midwest, and the only lesbians I had heard about with children had usually given birth to them in previous homosexual relationships. My girlfriend and I, however, had to start from scratch. Ever since we'd met, we had dreamed about having kids together. We decided on 4, and together we chose their names. The next step was more difficult. My girlfriend suggested her brother-in-law get hope. He was receptive, but I took a gay and lesbian legal rights course offered by the College of Law at my university and quickly gave up on the idea of a known donor. Courts had been known to give them custody rights. Imagine that, calling their gift of sperm an act of parenting. Imagine that. Luckily, we discovered a sperm bank that shipped right to our home, where the anonymous donors signed paperwork that legally barred them from ever seeking custody of the children they helped create. I hope this was a reciprocal arrangement. Because I was writing a doctoral dissertation at home, I would carry the first baby. We matched the donor to my partner, who was by now my wife, choosing someone of average height and weight who had studied literature, had wavy brown hair, and liked sports. The donor listed his profession as a writer, musician, and taxi driver. My wife and I romantically imagined that he was refusing to get a desk job and instead collecting the stories of those he picked up in his cab, readying to write the great American novels. People still use that phrase? I haven't heard it for a long time. And then she talks about getting pregnant at home and how fascinating that was. We hardly gave a thought to the donor that we assumed we would never meet. My wife was particularly hostile to the idea of ever letting our children get to know him. She felt that love made a family, and I agreed, and I'll get back to that. But we paid homage to his literary genes by reading thousands of books to our gestating bookworm. When Alice was born, she was perfect. All thoughts that the particularity of the DNA wasn't important went out the window. We agreed that we should clone this incredible being we had created with our love. We ordered sperm from the same donor and repeated the whole process, my wife giving birth to our second daughter when Alice was 18 months old. Both girls shared plenty of traits. Well, yeah, that's understandable. When the girls were 1 and 3 years old, my wife declared she was ending our relationship. There had been no conflict in our family, so I was shocked and heartbroken. She said she did not want to talk about it, and there was nothing I could do to repair our marriage. I continued parenting the sisters 5 days a week for a few years, but when Alice was 10, my ex-partner blocked Alice on her phone, cut off all contact with her, and refused to return her younger sister following a vacation. This remains the case today. On my ex-wife's side of the family, Alice's grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins haven't so much as sent her a birthday greeting in 2 years. She spends her days dreaming of the sister she was raised with and who she is afraid she will never see again. Alice knows more deeply than most children that family is neither genetically created or forged through parenting alone, but it is genetically created. And although genetics was a small part of what her family looked like for a decade, no, it was by far the major part. That also seemed like an unimportant part of who she was. Alice wondered where her ancestors came from. My mother had often told stories about the family's Cornish heritage to anyone who would listen. So Alice, who seems to have a different view about DNA than her and its importance than her mother, requested a DNA testing kit from her grandmother for Christmas when she was 11. The results came back about 8 weeks later. I clicked on the DNA relatives section of the site, not thinking anything would come of it, but the first thing I read was Aaron Long, 50% father. Bryce Gallo, 25% half-brother, was right behind. Of course, I had known this might happen, but it had to seem likely. Before writing a note on the site, I searched for Aaron online to see what I could learn. There are a lot of Aaron Longs in the world, so I set to work finding the one. I searched the professional social network for clues. On the sperm vials listed the date of donation, 1994, which helped narrow down birth and college graduation years. So she tracks him down. His profile said he was employed as a communications specialist and placed him in Seattle, a writer and musician. On another social media site, I discovered a Seattleite named Aaron Long with the correct workplace and with photos of each of his school portraits through the years. There was no doubt my daughters make that stupid face. So she sent him a message. and used the curiosity hook. We agreed to become friends on a social networking site, and Erin sent a 50-page long life history. Whoa, 50 pages. Alice had to be cajoled into writing her life story for Erin, and getting to know her DNA relatives is only mildly exciting for her, but she ordered that kit when she was 11. A few months later, Bryce and Maddie made plans to visit Erin in Seattle. Alice was interested to see whether the siblings and Erin resembled her. I agreed to let her take part. So, guess what happens? Guess what happens? I'd been dating a man for a few years who was also named Aaron David with a similar last name. On our vacation, donor Aaron flirtatiously suggested there had been a mix-up at the Bureau of Boyfriends. I smiled and demurred. I was already in a relationship and was conscious that donor Aaron was an important person to my kids, but not someone who should necessarily be part of my own life. I didn't want to spoil it for them. And yeah, so then they get together. Alice and I moved into Aaron's co-op in summer 2017. It's such a large building that there was plenty of room for another one of Aaron's bio kids to move in. Maddie, originally from the East Coast, found Aaron's in Seattle's right-brained, left-wing personality endearing and moved out this spring to live with all of us. We've even joined a Girl Scout troop with another one of Aaron's bio kids, who is the age of my youngest daughter and lives about an hour away. I quickly discovered that as a mom, I would gladly take any of our new half-siblings right inside, make them lunch, do their laundry, and take care of them forever. They are the siblings of my children, the genetic aunts and uncles of my grandchildren. I don't parent them, but I feel inexplicably, yeah, that's the key word, inexplicably drawn toward feeding them. Some of the spitting image of Alice, others resemble my youngest daughter. So, yes, Aaron's aging mom has also moved in along with her cat, Bill. Down the hall, Alice and I got a kitten. But making a family in all these new ways through the years, I've learned more about what family means than anyone would want to. DNA has become far more important than it was when I first picked a donor from a page. Yet it hasn't replaced the truism that families are built on love, not genes. After all of this remarkable story, this woman confesses that she seems to have this, attraction. She's a lesbian. She has this attraction to this man because he's the father of her children. And then she finds that she has this strong need to care for, nurture half siblings. This can only be explained by genetics, by DNA. I don't know, perhaps she doesn't believe what she said, but felt it necessary, to plump for nurture rather than nature, because, if you plump for nature rather than nurture, you get accused of all sorts of nasty things. There's an American actress called Alison Brie, who I absolutely think the world of, and I don't know, I'm worried about her. From Yahoo Life, Alison Brie says training for glow helped her battle body dysmorphia. Alison Brie has body dysmorphia. Alison Brie was simultaneously on Mad Men and Community. And I know just from reading the internet that Alison Brie was one of the most, how would you say, desired women in America. I mean, men were absolutely crazy about her. But let's see, Women's Health. She's on the cover of the May issue of Women's Health, and she looks very different indeed from when she was on Community and Mad Men. And it's not simply a question of age. While Netflix's Glow has helped Alison Brie to learn to appreciate her body, the 37-year-old actress said she still struggles with body dysmorphia. Only a sick society could make Alison Brie hate her body. I go back to red carpet photos when I thought I looked so horrible, and there are some where I now think, God, I looked beautiful, and I'll remember an hour before that I was in tears. I thought I was so disgusting. I think the lesson here is that Hollywood breaks women. Another American actress, Jennifer Connelly, another Mischling like Alison Brie, she went through a very similar thing. Have you ever seen the John Hughes written movie Career Opportunities? Again, she's in that movie riding a hobby horse, and the men in the audience were drooling. That's how attractive she was. But apparently someone in Hollywood, or maybe several people in Hollywood, told her that she was too fat. So she lost all this weight, and now she looks starved and efficient and unhappy. Very sad story. She's got an Oscar. Was it worth it? She continued, I think it's something I'll probably be working through my whole life, and depression too. Yeah, and there's various glamour shots of her. I'll drag myself to a yoga class, even if I don't want to be around people, tears streaming down my face, but get in class, get out of your head, get blood flowing, it ends up helping eventually. You know, she played Annie Edison in Community, and there was a joke on the show which became a meme that her character, when the show began, I think she was 25 years old in real life, but her character, I believe, was supposed to be 19. And the meme was, we've got to stop sexualizing Annie. And of course, the reason is because how incredibly sexual a figure she was on that show. But no, she came to believe that her body was disgusting. If you look at the film stars of yesteryear, you will find that a lot of them have figures similar to Alison Brie. I think we can attribute a great deal of this to Elizabeth Hurley, who's the woman who made the disgusting Gianni Versace's reputation when she wore the torn dress held together with safety pins. Elizabeth Hurley said, if I was as fat as Marilyn Monroe, I'd kill myself. Yeah, as fat as Marilyn Monroe. The woman who represented American sexuality for a generation, and still is an icon in that regard. Marilyn Monroe, ooh, disgustingly fat. You'd kill yourself. And so, you know, these women, they starve themselves, or they use drugs like Ritalin or cocaine in order to lose weight, while claiming it's done through exercise. You know, Alison Brie played Trudy Campbell on Mad Men, and I just thought, she was married to Pete Campbell, of course, who was a jackass who seemed to be actually envious of his own wife. How is that possible? You just know, in a situation like that, you know, some of his colleagues, or, you know, people who knew him, someone would say, hey, do you know that fellow, Pete Campbell? And the other person would say, that schmuck. Yeah, but have you seen his wife? Yeah, point taken. He's got to have something going for him. God knows if I know what it is. I remember reading in the comment section of the Onion AV Club that there's a scene in one of the episodes where Pete and Trudy go to bed, and Pete's wearing his, I think, striped pajamas, and Alison Brie is wearing this sea green shorty nightie. And one of the commenters said, when I saw that, my marriage died a little. And Pete has the best wife in the world, not just for her obvious physical attributes, but because of her intelligence and her fierce loyalty to him and his career. And he pisses it all away. And I thought, I know this is a fictional show, and I know I'm not one of the, you know, Manhattan Dykemans, but I just had this fantasy of talking to Pete Campbell and saying, yeah, Trudy, if you don't want her, can I have her? But yet, Alison Brie, she, I don't know, this show Glow, which I have not seen. I'm really not interested in female wrestling. It stands for what? Glamorous Ladies of Wrestling. And I saw some stills, and I thought, wow, they have managed to make Alison Brie unattractive. But perhaps this was this exercise regime that she is taking part in. You know, she's 37 years old now, and Catherine Deneuve had some advice for women. She said that at 40, a woman has to choose between her face and her ass. That is to say, that if you are going to, not have one spare ounce of fat on your body, let's say 5 pounds, it's going to be reflected in your face. Your face is going to become gaunt looking. The Duchess of Windsor said that one could never be too rich or too thin. She was certainly too thin, a wraith-like woman. But this phrase would appeal to a great many women. Now, obviously, there are few women who as good looking as Alison Brie, and it just breaks my heart to see this woman starve herself and make herself less beautiful because a bunch of men in the movie industry who clearly are not fond of women demand it. As I say, I worry for Alison Brie, and I hope she gets better soon. And of course, I'm going to be watching her movie, talking on Theater Thursday soon about her movie, what's it called, Horse Girl, which deals, I suppose, semi-autobiographically about her recent problems. So once more to the chat. Okay. Let's see. I feel Gates needed to be stuffed into lockers more, says D.B. Cooper. Interesting thing about Bill Gates. I think I read 2 biographies about him. That Gates was the smartest person that anyone had ever known at school. And then he went to Harvard to major, what do they call it? Concentrate on mathematics. And he discovered that there were people who were cleverer than he. And so he decided to leave Harvard and go into business, which I think is a remarkable thing. Okay, yes. John Miller says, can't even fix Microsoft and wants to give everyone vaccines. Okay, what else we got? Chad Chadson says, my ex was anorexic. Now she hides it by claiming vegan. Yeah, that's a sad, sad story. I mean, there doesn't seem to be any kind of happy median. You have these starved women, and then you have Lizzo. Oh, and, beautiful at every size, healthy at every size. No, there is such a thing as too thin, and there is such a thing as too fat. But again, Hollywood seems to be a very poor environment for women. There seem to be few of them who manage to escape. Donald Robertson said, Jennifer Connelly kind of looks like a monster. She was just a gorgeous young woman, just absolutely breathtaking. Okay, so that's what I have for today, which is Wednesday. We have Theater Thursday tomorrow. What are we going to be talking about? Oh, we're going to be talking about Let Me In, which is a Matt Reeves film from 2010, which is a remake of a Swedish film called Let the Right One In. I much prefer the American version. Matt Reeves directed Cloverfield, and he directed Let Me In. And how many directors anywhere at any time have 2 films as good as that on the resume? And for some reason, Matt Reeves seems to have been put in director prison. And I just thinking, like, who did he piss off? What did he do? And so what is Matt Reeves up to now? Oh, he will direct, write, and produce the upcoming superhero film, The Batman, 2021, which is set in the DC universe. Oh, yeah, we need another Batman movie. What was the joke? Wint joked that, every decade deserves 5 movies called Spider-Man 2? How many Batman movies do we need? And why does Matt Reeves have to make them? Given how extraordinarily talented he is. On April 23rd, we're going to be talking about Will Success Spoil Rock Hunter, which is about celebrities and stars Jane Mansfield, who is definitely not a starved woman. April the 30th, one of my favorite films, The Science of Sleep, or La Science des Rêves by Michel Gondry. On May 7th, one of Alec Guinness's finest performances, and that's saying quite a lot, Tunes of Glory from 1960, directed by Ronald Neame. And on May 14th, 7.62mm Full Metal Jacket. And on the Book Club Friday, we are discussing April Lost in the Cosmos by Walker Percy. It's called The Last Self-Help Book, and it's about the nature of humanity. That sounds like a big subject. It is a big subject. It's also a crash course in semiology. On April 24th, we're going to talk about scale, economic scale. Matthew Stoller's book, Goliath. On May the 1st, Woody Allen's memoir, Apropos of Nothing. That week in May, it is Alec Guinness Week. He wrote 3 autobiography, memoirs, diaries, whatever, and I'm talking about all of them. And on May the 15th, we're going to be talking about a book about China. And it's called Ways That Are Dark by Ralph Townsend. So I would like to thank all of you for tuning in, for watching, listening. I'll be back on the air tomorrow at 4 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. If you would like to support this live stream, my PayPal address is kevin_grace@hotmail.com. And once again, in this time of total atomization, I hope very much that all of you manage to maintain some form of human contact. Good night.